Our final speaker this morning, this morning going into this afternoon, is Craig Maki. He's an author and record collector. They are the author of Tomorrow Brings Memories, Detroit's first underground record company on Wax Hound Press. That's the book we're hopefully going to be hearing about today, which I'm really excited about. Craig is a writer, musician, and designer. He enjoys photography, drawing, playing guitar, and collecting old records, especially those having links with Michigan. For 10 years as Bones Maki, he hosted radio shows on public and commercial stations in Detroit and Ann Arbor with a focus on vintage rockabilly and country music. For the radio shows, besides presenting interviews with more famous artists, Maki collected conversations with musicians who lived and worked in the Detroit area during the 1930s through the 1980s. In 2013, the University of Michigan Press published Detroit Country Music, Mountaineers, Cowboys, and Rockabillys, a volume representing more than 20 years of research, which Maki co-authored with Keith Cady. Craig has presented his work on country music at one of our first Detroit Sound conferences, and also Kristen also has presented some of the work that went to that video from our earlier sound conferences at the Detroit Public Library, and I look forward to hearing about this new work from Craig today. Craig, take it away.
Thanks, Carlton. I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks for the invitation. All right, so as Carlton mentioned, I just recently published a book about a mystery that's been bugging me for many, many years, almost probably 2 decades or more. And let's see, as we begin, I'd like to just say that in this presentation, it's not my intention to come across expressing personal admiration for songs that could be interpreted as demeaning toward women. I encourage members of the audience to research songs that interest you. And I'll share info about some online music playlists at the end and consider the performances and their historic value. So I like to say that all roads lead to Fortune Records in Detroit, but and this sort of got me started on this research of the universal hot wax mellow connections. But the post-war boom in independent record companies coincided with the boom in popularity of country records. Within a few years, Jack Brown was issuing 78s by Detroit-based country artists, such as Bob Durham, Skeets McDonald, and Roy Hall. Tunes such as Skid Row Boogie by Bob Durham, which was about Detroit Skid Row, which was covered in local newspapers at the time, and also the Tattooed Lady and the Dirty Boogie sold so well for Brown in the jukebox field that he devoted himself to promoting Fortune Records to jukebox operators in Michigan and elsewhere. In 1949, Brown issued Hamtramck Mama, a country blues by the York Brothers that included both a local reference and hokum lyrics. With this release, Brown tipped his hand, revealing where he found his new business model, as Hamtramck Mama had originally been issued in 1939 by another local company. At the time of Brown's reissue, the men behind the first release still lived in Detroit. So in 1939, Detroit was a busy place. Manufacturing industry and construction sectors were recovering from the Great Depression. Detroit's jukebox business community numbered fewer than 100 companies and individual operators, most of whom knew each other on a personal basis, as far as I could tell. By the late 1930s, jukebox operators purchased more than half of the records made in America. Not only did jukeboxes provide the public with on-demand musical entertainment, but they helped record companies determine which records were popular and where by keeping track of how many times a song was played in the machines. They also made it possible for operators and venue owners to curate records. This situation sometimes led to novelty songs with playful lyrics suggesting sexy themes to appear in the jukeboxes of bars and 24-hour hamburger joints. The success of these types of records and jukeboxes led many operators to keep this money-making category alive, even as captains of the entertainment industry objected through editorials in the pages of Billboard magazines and newspapers. And I'm going to do a survey of the records that were all connected to these people. There's a lot more information, biographical information and other sources, just explaining how I got to put together all of this information. But basically, in 1939, a fellow named Louis Schown was a musician and something of a mechanic and electrician, opened up a public recording service on the east side of Detroit. And his first commission was actually by a German dance band that was performing on WEXL in Royal Oak from 1935 to 1940. And here's a musical clip. So this record and possibly another one that I haven't been able to trace were issued by commission. The group probably paid Mr. Schown for studio time and suppressed some records for them. This 1941 photograph was shot on East Jefferson Avenue at Gray Street looking east. Most of the structures you see no longer exist. The only one still standing is the empty shell of the Hotel Savarine, originally built 100 years ago as a housing option for, quote, clean living men, which included members of the Detroit Tigers and Lions professional sports teams through the years. So the first arrow points to the block where Universal Sound Studios had its storefront. The second points kind of in the area where a second location appeared a couple of years later on 965 Dickerson Avenue. It was just around the corner from the original studio. And then the third one in the block east of the hotel is where the Mellow Music Shop opened up in the mid-40s. So one of the very next commissions that Schown received was actually from Harry Graham, who was managing Marquette Music Company, the largest jukebox operator in Michigan at the time. He had been with the company for 10 years and was also the Wurlitzer company's sales representative in the state of Michigan. And he had just opened a new distribution company to sell music to other jukebox operators in Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. And he commissioned a couple of factory workers who had some radio experience down in Portsmouth, Ohio. The York brothers, George and Leslie, who were originally from Louisa, Kentucky, East Kentucky. So they made this record, Hamtramck Mama, and Harry Graham pressed a couple thousand and quickly sold out and reordered after that. Let's hear a little bit of this.
Talk about your truckin' mama, boys, I've got one. She's a Hamtramck baby and she has her fun. She's a Hamtramck mama, and she sure does know her stuff. She's the hottest thing in town. Lordy, how she can love. Oh, she's trucking in the daytime, shamming at night. She's a Hamtramck Mama and she shakes it right. She's a Hamtramck Mama and she sure does know her stuff.
I should note that at the time, a lot of white Southerners were moving to Detroit, and the East Side neighborhood where Universal Recording Studios was based, and just west of there were a number of large factories and manufacturers of all kinds, in operation, and a lot of white Southerners were moving into that area. So in early 1940, the mayor of Hamtramck and his city council banned Hamtramck Mama from the jukeboxes within that city's borders, which also led to more sales, because that news quickly spread across the country. And even NBC radio broadcaster Lowell Thomas discussed it on his program. However, Harry Graham removed the Marquette reference on subsequent releases, and I don't know for sure whether he secretly financed the follow-up record, which was called Highland Park Girl and backed with Detroit Hulu Girl. But replacing the reference to Marquette was the address of the Universal's recording studios, and they changed that reference to Universal Record Company. So there was another man, East Side jukebox operator named Edward Kiley, whose backstory is fascinating, and I go into deeper depth on that in the book. But he grew up, he was born in Detroit in 1896. He grew up in downtown near where the Renaissance Center stands these days. And from age 17, he got in trouble with the law a lot. For probably about half his life, he was in and out of jail. But in the early 30s, he wound up starting a coin machine route on the East Side and eventually moved into jukeboxes. And the productions that followed on Universal and then the rest have his fingerprints all over them. This image on the slide is from a November 11th, 1939 edition of Billboard, depicting a scene with Wurlitzer's sales reps, including Harry Graham, third from left, and Edward Kiley at the far right. So the next couple releases were pop records, and Kiley's home address appeared under the Universal Record Company name on these labels. Interesting stuff here. Earl Gilson, who did this Please Mr. President, which also has a reference to Ed Kiley as one of the writers, died in 1936. So the presumption is that Kiley had a couple of these recordings by Gilson in hand and took them to Universal and had them pressed, along with new B-sides. You'll Never Be Forgotten and Please Mr. President were paired together. Jack Campbell, who did You'll Never Be Forgotten, was born in Ireland, grew up in Florida, traveled with big bands during the 1930s, and led the house band at the Greystone Ballroom during 1939. He wound up returning to Florida during the war and died in 1958. The musical accompaniment on this record really reminds me of Detroit pianist Bobby Stevenson and guitarist Bob Mitchell, who the two of those guys collaborated quite a bit after the war. They were in local clubs nightly and eventually moved out west together. I have a clip of Please Mr. President here. It sounds much older than contemporary music from the time.
Please, Mr. President, keep America out of the war. We had it once before, and of war we want no more. The skies look gray and people say that soon we may be marching for the USA. So please, Mr. President, keep America out of the war.
And then the record label on the right is from the one that followed these two, the first two here. She Won't Turn Over For Me is a fast tempo jazz with ridiculous lyrics comparing romancing a woman with maintaining an automobile. No idea who the vocalist True Identity was, but the pianist again sounds like Bobby Stevenson, and the guitarist sounds like Bob Mitchell. It also includes possibly a tenor saxophone, if my ears read that correctly, and a trumpet. But this was a tune that was later recorded for Fortune's Renown label by Tommy Odom and Floyd Compton's Western Band in '51. Very interesting connection there. Here's a little clip of it.
I can't get it started, I can't get it started, she won't turn over for me. Oh, I can't get it started, I can't get it started, I don't know what the trouble can be. Now her lines are all right, and her body's a sport. She won't do much in a gallon, but she'll raise hell on a quart. But still I can't get her started, I can't get her started, she won't turn over for me.
And Kylie placed another old Earl Gilson number on the flip side of that. This was one of the biggest surprises for me, pleasant surprise. After several issues by the Universal Record Company, another custom order was pressed for the Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal Church, located at Willis and Brush. Elizabeth Gary was the music director, and it's 4 sides that are just remarkably beautiful. Early Black church music from Detroit, and I'm not sure if it's the oldest on record, but it's definitely one of the earliest. This photo here is from the Detroit Tribune that I found with the senior choir of the church. Ms. Gary taught and produced music in Detroit for 6 decades, and her students included Mayor Coleman A. Young, jazz guitarist Kenny Burrell, and opera singer George Shirley. And she died in 1980 and received a really nice tribute in the Detroit Free Press. Here's a clip of the record label picture. So at the end of 1940, the Universal Record Company moved into that Dickerson Avenue location, a little storefront there where Kylie sold records, and Shawn also repaired radios, which is something he did until his death in '55. But anyway, the York brothers cut a few more records, including a topical piece called Conscription Blues, which is a great song about civilian to military life. And then when they signed with Decca Records in early '41, Shawn and Kylie tried to find other local artists to make records, and they found Rise Red River Blue Yodelers featuring Forrest Rye, who was singing as Conrad Brooks. Notice the change in the labels too here.
here.
Here's a little bit of conscription blues.
Uncle Sam is calling me. Yeah, boy, got some conscription blues. I don't know why they have to do these funny things to me. Although I know I'm living in a land of liberty. They made me sign with Uncle Sam, I guess they got you too. And we'll be one among the boys of Uncle Sam's new crew. Uncle Sam is calling me.
That's Les York playing the lead guitar on that. So the Hillbilly production sold really well, apparently, because they kept making more and more. While the York brothers recorded for Decca, they found other local artists, and including Billy Castile with the Silver Sage Buckaroos. This Wayne County Blues record was on the back of a remake of Hamtramck Mama entitled Hollywood Mama, but the Wayne County Blues was cited by Billboard as the local hit in spring of 1941. Here's a little bit of that.
Old Wayne County Blues. Oh, the judge and the juries, they are nice. They send us up here for collecting graft on crooked dice. People pay their taxes on their home just to give us money to gamble on. We got those Wayne County Blues, lordy, lordy, lordy. Got those Wayne County Blues.
So that first lyric there mentions graft and crooked dice. That was composed during a time when the state was investigating political corruption in Wayne County and the Detroit area. A whole lot of people went to jail as a result of that. Forrest Rye returned with another ditty as Conrad Brooks. He was from west of Nashville, came up to Detroit during the 1920s and worked for Ford, eventually doing a lot of welding at the Rouge River plant. During the early 40s, mid 40s, he also traveled to WSM radio and appeared on the Grand Ole Opry as comedian Little Willie Rye. And he was probably the first Detroit-based musician to make appearances on the program. Also an interesting group that recorded, I just want to mention before I continue that the Hot Wax label came after the Universal label, and also the on the Hot Wax labels you can find a reference to the Mellow Record Company. So after Kylie signed a deal with Buell Sons and Company to distribute the records, he wound up changing the label to Mellow, which probably appealed more to the Buell Sons. Anyway, one of the more interesting combos on record for Mellow was this quartet of women called Evelyn Hare and the Swingtime Cowgirls. These records represent the first appearance of Western swing played by a group of women on records. Here's a little bit. Whoops. Oh, shoot. I'm trying to... Hang on a second. Let me get back there.
This is Evelyn Hare and the Swingtime Cowgirls. Hey, away, gal.
back to my prairie, sweetheart. Take me back where I belong. And let me ride down the trail to the valley while I sing a cowboy song. Someone is waiting just around the bend. I'm heading back when it's roundup time again. I'm going back to my prairie, sweetheart. I'll walk right up to that old cabin door. Together we'll settle down on the prairie. I've made a vow I'll never roam no more.
And in the photo, that's Evelyn with the bass. So after those Swingtime Cowgirls records, the York Brothers returned to the fold, and they recorded 17 more records for Mellow, and it was incredible or 15 more. I'm sorry, 15 more records. However, I should add that a number of one-sided discs of tunes that were not on two-sided records have turned up in the years since then. I don't know if they were ever issued commercially or not, but it's remarkable because during wartime material shortages, Kylie was issuing these things. And he probably stopped when the AFM recording ban went into effect in August of '42. But I'm not sure because one of the last records they issued, A Merry Christmas to the Boys Over There, the York Brothers expressed hope for the war to end in 1943. And that was kind of a jukebox hit at the end of that year. The York Brothers continued performing steadily in nightclubs in Detroit and also had a gig on WJLB radio every week. After '46, since the York Brothers returned from serving in the Navy and they wound up going to the Grand Ole Opry right away, they returned to Detroit in '49 and left town in '53 when their hit for King Records, Tennessee Tango, ran its course and moved to Dallas. But they left an impressive legacy of more than 100 recordings for several labels, including Universal Hot Wax, Mellow, for which they recorded about 45 titles that are documented. Decca, Bullet King, Sage Caravan, and their own York Brothers records. I also want to note that during their time in Detroit, this second time around with Mellow, a bass player named Johnny Lavender joined them, and they cut some music with the two guitars and bass style that sounds very much like Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash's first records for Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee, that were made a dozen years later. So after the war, Kylie received some mentions in Billboard, but he never restarted the label. This one record, Going to the Shindig, might have been done after the war because it just mentions the shop on East Jefferson. So for a while, he operated two shops, but by 1950, he and Shawn had some kind of separated their businesses, and Shawn continued operating Globe Music. And it was around 1949 that I believe Jack Brown got some Universal Masters from Mr. Shawn because he reissued Hamtramck Mama and Conscription Blues that year. And then Tommy Odom did She Won't Turn Over for Me in 1951. And then Brown reissued Detroit Hula Girl and Going Home in 1954. And one of the more mysterious records that Brown issued was by the Shawn Brothers, which was not actually an act, but it may have been a reference to Shawn himself. I'm not sure. The record was actually by the Shelton Brothers, and it was a bootleg of a 1941 hit, The Flip Side of Kusiku. Anyway, also after the war, Sean might have made more records. I found these catalog numbers on Vargo and Arcadia records that Charlie Jones and Elton Adams did in Detroit. They kind of follow the same pattern as the 1600 series that the York brothers made for Mellow. So Ed Kiley died of a heart attack in '53, and his wife sold the Mellow Music Shop a year later, which stayed in business through the 1960s. Sean died in 1955. And Jack Brown kept the 1939 versions of Hamtramck Mama and Highland Park Girl in print through the 1960s. Again, it's remarkable that between 1939 and 1942, the Universal Hot Wax Mellow Company produced 35 two-sided records in quantity. And in my book, there's a discography, but there are some missing numbers. So I'm sure there may have been more.
Craig, we're yeah, great, perfect, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so I put together some playlists on YouTube and Spotify. You can search for them with the Tomorrow Brings Memories title. And if you want to get in touch, best place to do it is carcitycountry.com or the Facebook page for my Detroit country music book. And the new book is available online. Go ahead and make a search for it if you're interested. Thank you.
Craig, thank you so much. Thank you to all the presenters. We've only got a couple of minutes here. First of all, a round of applause in the chat and everywhere on 3. Very different. I don't know how it feels to the audience. I can't be in your shoes unless you tell us. But from my point of view, as founding director of Detroit Sound Conservancy, knowing a little bit about these individuals and the research they're doing, I can feel the resonances between all the presentations and how they reinforce one another. And because I am the chair, I'm going to be greedy and just say one. For Kristen, wish they were here, but turn me on, dead man. 2, I want to say to Colleen, thank you for stating how the archive has a capacity to give back, and Colleen's work with engaging estates, I think, is critical. And then with Craig, I just want to say myself personally that there's so much connection there between the work I'm trying to do with United Sound Systems and what you're doing. And I know we've talked about these things over the years, with Coleman Young and those recordings. I think long about the long CIO 20th century, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the fact that Coleman Young is on that recording, and the long cultural front of the 20th century. And, we'll talk more about that. We had one question in the chat from a while ago. It was from Bill, and it said, how do you get the rights to the material? They didn't say who that was for, but let's go to Colleen. Briefly, Colleen, can you just respond back and just talk a little bit about how you deal with rights audio issues?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I'm spoiled in that I am at a university, at a library, so we have a fair use copyright, so I can make limited digitized copies for the use of education. That is kind of the copyright law. For a lot of these bands that no longer exist, it's really difficult to get any kind of rights. I proceed with caution. So while I have most of this music digitized, it's not digitally openly available. It's only available to U of M students, staff, and faculty. So that's the way we kind of get around it, is using that kind of library clause and only having this material open to the faculty, staff. And that's in theory. If somebody came up to me, with the finding aid and wanted to hear this music, I would still have them hear the music. We actually worked with a documentarian making the Breed and Bootleg documentary, and she's not a faculty, staff, or student. She's at another university, but we were able to still get that music to her with permission from the people who are still around. So if something is being used in a really publicly available way, I will go to the artist. Luckily, a lot of them still live in Flint, especially the punk guys. I have an in. One of the former punk guys actually is my assistant director at the library. So he's able to track down a lot of these fellas, and I'm able to get rights permission from the artist. So that's kind of the way we do it.
Colleen, that sounds great. One last question before we head out. Craig, there's a request here. When is there going to be a CD of Detroit country music? I think you have a push here to do a compilation. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot available out there, like on YouTube and Spotify. You just have to know what you're looking for. But yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to participate in a project like that.
Well, you've got some allies maybe on this call who might be able to make it happen. And there was a question by Brenda Nelson Strauss about a very specific one. Why don't you check it out in the questions? Maybe you can chat back with them on that specific question. Everybody, thank you so much. Appreciate everyone. Detroit Sound Conservancy in the house. Very proud of all these presenters. We will see you tomorrow. We will see you later today, of course, and then tomorrow, 1 p.m. Saturday Eastern Time for our keynote panel on United Sound Systems. With that, everybody, take care. Take care of yourselves.